Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, Today in History, where we take a single date on the calendar and realize that human beings have been screwing things up and occasionally fixing them for centuries. September 24th, folks, a day where nations were founded, mobs rioted, gold prices tanked, rockets soared, and somewhere in there, a frog puppet was born who became more famous than most presidents. It's basically a historical buffet, a little law, a little racism, a dash of colonial collapse, and some puppets for dessert. So grab a plate because September 24th is serving it hot. Segment 1, Forging a Nation's Judiciary, the Judiciary Act of 1789. On September 24th, 1789, George Washington signed the Judiciary Act into law, creating the federal court system. Up until then, the Constitution just said there will be a Supreme Court, which is like writing there will be a bathroom in your blueprints but never installing the plumbing. Washington basically called a plumber, and that plumber's name was Oliver Ellsworth, who drafted the bill. The act created the Supreme Court, district courts, and circuit courts, which sounds neat until you realize the Supreme Court justices had to circuit ride. That meant literally traveling around the country hearing cases. Imagine telling Brett Kavanaugh he has to get out of his recliner and ride a horse to Nebraska to hear about a cow dispute. He'd spill his beer before the horse even left a stable. And the kicker? Section 25 of the act gave the Supreme Court authority to review state court decisions. Translation: nice ruling, Georgia, but daddy gets the final word. This basically made the Supreme Court the boss of bosses, like Tony Soprano, but with powdered wigs. Segment 2, The Line in Little Rock, Eisenhower versus Segregation, 1957. Fast forward to 1957. The Little Rock Nine try to go to school. Governor Faubus calls in the National Guard to block them, and Eisenhower has to step in. On September 24th, Ike federalizes the Arkansas Guard and sends the 101st Airborne. Now, Eisenhower wasn't exactly the Martin Luther King Jr. of presidents. He didn't wake up saying, "I have a dream." He woke up saying, "I have a tea time." But when mobs are rioting, kids are trapped in schools, and a governor is basically saying segregation forever, even Ike had to put down his golf club and pick up the Constitution. So he did the most baller move imaginable. He took Faubus's National Guard away from him. That's like your kid stealing your credit card, and instead of grounding them, you call the bank and make your kid pay the bill. The next day, the Little Rock Nine marched into school, flanked by soldiers with bayonets. You know it's serious when algebra class looks like a scene from Saving Private Ryan. Segment 3, The Birth of Guinea-Bissau, 1973, Declaration of Independence. Meanwhile, across the ocean, on September 24th, 1973, Guinea-Bissau declared independence from Portugal. And Portugal was like, "What? No, you didn't." Which is exactly what you say when your girlfriend dumps you, but you still text her like nothing happened. The guerrilla fighters had been waging war for years, and by 73, they controlled most of the countryside. Portugal insisted they still ran things, but Guinea-Bissau had Soviet missiles and international recognition. Portugal, meanwhile, had, well, fado music and a dictatorship nobody liked. Within a year, Portugal's entire colonial empire collapsed. This was called Portugal's Vietnam, which is history's way of saying, congrats, you've lost a war so badly that it becomes shorthand for all future humiliations. Segment 4, Black Friday, the gold panic of 1869. Now, let's talk about greed, because what's history without a Wall Street scam? On September 24th, 1869, Jay Gould and James Fisk tried to corner the gold market. It was basically the 19th century version of pump and dump, except instead of crypto bros on Reddit, it was robber barons with top hats. They bribed officials, even got President Grant's brother-in-law involved. Always a brother-in-law, isn't it? If history teaches us anything, it's never trust the guy at Thanksgiving who brings up an exciting new investment opportunity. Anyway, Grant catches wind of the scam and orders the Treasury to sell gold. Prices collapse, the market tanks, and suddenly all the farmers and traders are broke. Gould, of course, weasels out mostly fine while everyone else gets wrecked. It's basically FTX with less SPF and more mutton chops. Segment 5, From Bicycles to Civics, Honda is born, 1948. But not all September 24ths are doom and gloom. In 1948, Soichiro Honda founded Honda Motor Company. His first idea? Slap a surplus generator engine on a bicycle. That's not just innovation, that's the definition of, I duct tape this thing and now it works. From there, Honda built the Super Cub, the most popular motor vehicle in history. Then, the Civic, which Americans bought during the oil crisis because suddenly big gas-guzzling cars felt less patriotic and more like setting your wallet on fire. Honda also changed motorcycle culture in the U.S. with their campaign, You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda, which is PR speak for, relax, Mom, not every guy on a motorcycle is in the Hells Angels. Sometimes he's just a dentist trying to feel alive. Segment 6, Taking Flight, from dirigibles to blind flying. September 24th also gave us big aviation milestones. In 1852, Henri Giffard flew the first powered airship. Imagine a giant hydrogen balloon with a steam engine strapped to it. Basically, the Hindenburg's weird French uncle. Then in 1929, Jimmy Doolittle made the first blind flight, relying only on instruments. He took off, flew, and landed without looking out the window. That's trust. I won't even trust Google Maps when it tells me to stay on the roundabout. Doolittle's flight paved the way for modern aviation, proving you don't need eyes when you've got gadgets, which, coincidentally, is also Elon Musk's argument for why it's okay to drive a Tesla into a lake. Segment 7, Big Ships, Red Planets, and Space Rocks. On September 24th, 1960, the USS Enterprise, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, was launched. 8 nuclear reactors, virtually unlimited range. America basically said, what if we made a Costco that floats and can invade you? Fast forward to 2014, India's Mars orbiter mission entered orbit on its first try. First try! NASA took decades. Russia blew up a bunch of rockets, but India walked in like the kid who aces the test without studying. And they did it on a budget smaller than the movie Gravity. That's humiliating. Oh, you spent $100 million making Sandra Bullock spin in space? We actually went there for less. And in 2023, NASA's OSI-RISR-EX mission dropped off samples from asteroid Bennu, actual space rocks. The kind of thing kids bring home and their mom says, don't leave that dirty thing on the counter. Except this time, it's worth billions in research, not a frog skeleton from the creek. Segment 8, Storytellers and Puppets, Fitzgerald, Henson, and Seuss. September 24th also gave us cultural giants. F. Scott Fitzgerald was born in 1896, Jim Henson in 1936, and Dr. Seuss died in 1991. That's the full circle of American imagination, the tragic writer, the puppeteer of joy, and the rhyming anarchist. Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby, a story about the American dream turning into a hangover. Jim Henson created Kermit, a frog more relatable than most humans. And Dr. Seuss taught us that literacy could come with the side of psychedelics. Honestly, if you read The Cat in the Hat sober, you're doing it wrong. Segment 9, The Stopwatch Starts, 60 Minutes, 1968. Finally, in 1968, 60 Minutes premiered. The stopwatch ticks. Like Wallace ambushes some CEO, and suddenly TV news was entertainment. Before that, the news was Walter Cronkite saying, here's the facts, good night. Now it was, here's the facts, but with a jump scare. 60 Minutes proved news could make money, which is both inspiring and horrifying. Without it, we might not have CNN yelling at us 24 hours a day, or Fox News telling you your toaster is woke. In conclusion, so September 24th, a day of creation and crisis. Courts created, gold destroyed, nations born, schools desegregated, rockets launched, puppets invented. If history were Netflix, September 24th would be the platform's recommended for you page. A weird mix of serious dramas, absurd comedies, and documentaries about people making bad financial decisions. And that, folks, is why this date matters. Because sometimes the most random day on the calendar reminds us that law, greed, courage, imagination, and occasionally a frog puppet all shape who we are.